Well, good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, which is the second in the SFJ Awards Insights series. My name's Candice Miller. I'm the Managing Director of SFJ Awards, and I'm going to be hosting this event today. The SFJ Awards Insights programme, of which this is a part, actually builds on our commitment to support the centres, the employers, the wider contacts we work with, by providing an opportunity to share news, to share information and best practice with you in relation to our various services and the things that you're working on. Our first Insights webinar took place in November last year, and we launched there our new custom certification service, which I'm aware some of you attending today have already been in touch with us about. We're going to be running more events over the year ahead. But also later on, we're going to be asking you about what interest you might have in us running an annual SFJ Awards conference of some sort, whether virtually as this, or whether in face-to-face, assuming that becomes a possibility once the roadmap is played out. But that's in addition to the webinar events, because the webinars we're trying to really give you something that you can drop into at lunchtime like this. So we'll be asking you about that later. But today's event is all about qualifications, and in particular about how can we best maintain quality in this virtual world that we've all become so very familiar with over the past year. Here at SFJ Awards, we are absolutely committed to quality in everything we do. And by quality, what I'm talking about is the robustness, the accuracy, the validity and the reliability of the different assessment processes that are carried out and which are so vital to the credibility and the confidence that we can all have in the value and the meaning and the impact for learners and employers of the qualifications and certifications that we issue. Over the course of this session, we've got 3 speakers for you, and they'll be presenting individually, and I'll introduce them properly as we go through. One person I want to mention up front, however, is the wonderful Zoe Printer, who's working in the background to keep the smooth running of this show on the road. Zoe will be making sure, hopefully, that everything runs effectively to time. We've got various presentations, and Zoe will be helping to bring those up to support our speakers. What I also want to mention, though, is that we're actually going to have this event graphically recorded by the very talented illustrators at Carbon Orange. And they'll be turning the presentations and the conversations that we have today into a piece of artwork, which we'll be sending around after the event. So it'll be something there as an aide-memoire for you of the discussion that we've had. Before we begin, I'm just going to run through a bit of housekeeping so you know how to participate in the event. I'm sure we are all far more familiar with how Zoom webinars run than we ever thought we would be 12 months ago. But just in case, a couple of quick points. At any point during the webinar, you can submit any questions to our presenters that you want to have answered. To do so, you just type your question into the Q&A feed, which is you'll see it at the bottom of the control panel on your screen. You can also upvote the questions that resonate with you the most. And as time allows, the presenters will address as many of those questions as they can during the Q&A session that we'll have at the end of the webinar. And any questions we can't answer today, we'll reply to after the webinar. We've also got a couple of our colleagues in the background answering any very specific questions that might pop up. But for most of the questions, I'm sure we'll try and get to during the course of today or as a follow-up. We'd also like this webinar to be two-way, and as much as it's possible to do that in these sort of situations. So as usual in the webinar, attendee speakers will be muted. So the way you can best engage with us to add any comments you might have about what you're hearing, or to even chat to other people attending the webinar, is to use the chat function. And again, as you probably know already, you'll find that at the bottom of your screen. If you could use the question and answer for questions and the chat for comments, but if you do get them one in the wrong place, don't worry about it. You'll see me looking across to my other screen, and I've actually got both the chat and the question and answer popped out, so I'll be able to keep an eye on that and bring things to everybody's attention when we get to the Q&A. But just to kick things off and to demonstrate the use of one of the other interactive elements we want to use today, we're just going to pop up a very quick poll, which Zoe will pop up on your screen. And it's really about how's your day so far? How's it been going for you? So what I would like you to do, if you will, please, is could you just pop your answer in? What are you doing? Are you busy, productive? Do you need more coffee? Is it all going well? You're loving it? What's your response? Where's your answer? You could just put your answer in, click submit, we'll get the results and they will pop up as we go through. So while you're doing that, we'll just wait and see. And another question that I've got, oh, there we go. It's busy but productive. Well, that's good. And actually it looks like more people are having a good time and feeling productive than need more coffee or have reached the weekend yet or hoping for that to come. So that sounds quite positive. So let's hope we can have a really good discussion then. The other thing I'm just going to suggest that you might want to have a go at on the chat function, if you want to just pop in your name, pop in your role, pop in where you are, so we all know who else is on the webinar. And then we know who we're chatting to. And if you see names of people you know well, you can use that to just have a bit of a natter with them as we go. Thank you for taking part in that poll. We'll be using other polls throughout the event, so please do engage with them as well. And at the end of the event, we'll be sharing the slides and a link to the website where you can re-watch this webinar or share it with any of your colleagues who aren't able to be here today. It will be available on demand on the SFJ Awards website for the next 6 months. And for anyone who asked for a limited edition webinar pack, hopefully you've had those now. But if you haven't, don't worry, they are on the way and they'll be with you soon. So that's the how to do it bit. What we're now going to just talk you through very briefly is how the webinar will run before I hand over to our speakers. So our first speaker up this morning is John Clark, and John's going to be telling you about the adaptations and innovations that we at SFJ Awards have introduced over this year to help maintain that quality, that robustness, that reliability in the face of the challenges that we've all faced and that the pandemic has brought to face-to-face delivery of learning and development. We then got a slight alteration to the published agenda. We were due to hear from Mike Needham from New Generation Training and Consultancy. However, unfortunately for us, but very fortunately for his learners, Mike is out on the road delivering face-to-face training today, which has meant he's got some connectivity issues, so he's not able to join us. However, I'm delighted to welcome, and I'll introduce her properly later, Tracy Considine, who's Head of Quality, also at New Generation Training and Consultancy, and she's kindly stepped in and will be talking to us a bit about how their organisation has been facing up to the challenges of curriculum planning and learning delivery and how they've adapted. And then our third speaker, Jane Hodder, will talk about what the changed circumstances have meant for quality control processes and the insights that she's been able to gain from a kind of helicopter view from an external quality assurance perspective as she's been liaising with centres across the country. What we'll then do is we'll have time for a Q&A session before we finish today, so please don't forget, pop any questions or comments you have into the Q&A or the chat, and we'll get back to them later. So what I'd now like to do is hand over the controls to my colleague, John Clark. John is SFJ Awards Head of Assurance and Head of Awards and Assurance Services. And John's going to talk to you a bit about what we in Awards have been trying to do to make sure that your learners can carry on progressing, carry on achieving their qualifications, despite the lockdowns and social distance measures that we've been facing over the course of the past year. So, John, I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you, Candice. And I'm delighted to be talking to you today. Candice mentioned our commitment to the quality of our qualifications is at the heart of what we do. And it's vital to support confidence, value, and impact for learners, employers in the certifications that we award. As we go through the session, these are the questions via the Q&A chat function, and we'll answer as many as possible during the session. Questions and answers will be circulated after the session to all attendees, including any questions raised today which we don't have time to answer during the webinar. I hope you will enjoy the presentation today and recognise that our approaches and support will provide you with a flexible and agile service which meet our regulated qualification requirements. In recognition of your participation in this event today, I'm pleased to tell you that you will also be receiving an SFJ Awards Certificate of Attendance. So I'd like to start today's webinar with something slightly different and look at some of the memorable events which have changed the way we approach and innovate. So feel free to suggest in the chat function what happened in 1999 or 2000. Let's see what responses we get to that one. Some of us will remember the arrival of the noughties. Fears that the dreaded millennium bug was going to bring the world to a halt at midnight, with computer programs' ability to process dates beyond 31st of December 1999. And there we went into nothing happened in reality. 2010, 2011, this is going to be a slightly more difficult one for you. Please add your suggestions to chat on what product was launched in 2010. No ideas on that one yet? So the iPad was released on April 3rd, 2010. And finally, back to 2019-20. I think we all know the answer to that one. We got Zoom, we got Teams, and the faithful saying, I think you're on mute. So as we move on in 2020, with the considerable disruption to learners and centre activities due to COVID-19 lockdowns, our regulators introduced the Extraordinary Regulatory Framework, ERF. This was extended during the second lockdown to become the aptly named Extended ERF. Let's look at the key features of the ERF adaptations. They include the use of Centre Assessed Grades, or CAG, which was mainly used for functional skills, Adapted Assessment, which has covered most of our qualifications, and on occasion it was necessary to delay assessment until they could be safely taken. In reality, we had very few of these. For example, domestic fire safety, when COVID restrictions prevented entry to homes. So what does the ERF mean to assessment? It's important for us to continue providing our centres with the support needed to meet these adaptations whilst retaining quality, validity, reliability of the different assessment processes which we offer, and retain public confidence in the qualifications until we are finally able to return to normal. So what have we done? We've published our adaptation arrangements for 2021 for centres on our website. These have been developed in collaboration with our stakeholders, including sector bodies, centres, and our EQAs, to ensure that they remain compliant with Ofqual's extended extraordinary regulatory framework principles. Our key priority remains to mitigate the impact on learners from any restrictions caused by the pandemic, and to ensure the continued quality, validity, and reliability of our qualifications. Consultation with our regulators and other awarding bodies has enabled us to develop several mitigation options which have affected learners and which enable learners to receive valid, reliable results for the assessments that they were unable to sit by normal means. Jane will be looking at our external quality assurance adaptations later in the webinar, so let's look at some examples of our qualification adaptations. Assessments that use observations to provide a source of evidence, then observations can be carried out remotely via Teams, via Zoom, via Skype. We do recommend that where possible, The observation will be recorded and therefore will be available for the IQA and EQA to sample to ensure that quality standards are met. Where it is not possible for the assessor to observe the live assessment activity, then a recording must be made available, ideally with audio and visual. The assessor will need to assess this and document accordingly. Real work assessment of learners in practice is preferred, but this is not always feasible due to current restrictions, and so expert witness testimony from experienced qualified employers may be admissible. It should be noted that where simulation is considered, the centre must check the relevant handbook to see if this simulation is allowed with that qualification. If you're in any doubt, please get in touch with our quality assurance team, where these approaches will ensure that our assessments deliver the best possible learner and centre outcomes. And we've looked at some new and innovative approaches, such as the use of remote invigilation. For those of you new to this type of technology, I think this short video will give you an overview of some of the key features.
To make your exam attempt successful, it is important to know how Proctorio works and to start preparing in time. Do the Proctorio practice test to make sure you are ready and your laptop meets all requirements. Before the exam begins, Proctorio asks you to do pre-checks. If you encounter technical issues during the exam, contact exam support straight away. A diagnostics test will check if your internet, microphone, and webcam are working. Retest if any problem occurs. If this doesn't work, contact the Proctorio help desk. Take a clean picture of your UVA student card. Never show an official ID without shielding your signature and ID number. You can retake the picture if your name and student number are invisible. You need to scan your desk. Start by showing your complete desk from one side to the other, very slowly. You need to show everything you are permitted to use during the exam for 5 seconds to the webcam. After finishing all the scans, you can start. During the exam, you need to keep screen sharing on the entire exam. Check the lighting to make sure you are not over or underexposed. Stay visible to the webcam at all times, even when writing on paper. Also make sure you are alone with nobody else in the room. And try to avoid looking away from your screen. Headphones and a virtual microphone are not allowed. Use simple foam earplugs if needed. If the exam required you to write down your solutions on paper, clearly show all your solution papers to the webcam before submitting. Consult the student manual Proctorio for more details.
So this platform works in conjunction with our current online exam platform, enabling the digital delivery of tests without the need for an invigilator. The software itself eliminates much of the expense associated with traditional invigilation by validating the identities of learners, evaluating the room. Artificial intelligence flags for suspicious behaviours, scans for plagiarism. The exam data is recorded and made available for review, and there is a live chat function to support learners. We're currently running a successful pilot of proctoring technology, and as a result, in March, we're intending to introduce the option of using our new proctoring service, which provides the security and integrity for online assessments. I do hope that you found this presentation useful today, and if you would like any further information on the various adaptations and processes discussed, please contact us at info@sfjawards.com. I'd like to thank you and goodbye for now.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. So clearly a lot of thinking of adaptations over these past months, and I think we've all been finding ways to make sure that we can live with and use technology to best effect, and providing online invigilation in addition to the existing online assessment services that we do is clearly a further adaptation that we're looking forward to making available to you as we go into the future. So that's what we've been doing. what would be good now, and what I'm going to do, hopefully move us on to, is to hear from a training provider about the kind of adaptations they've been making to just keep that quality up there, so that the learners and the value and the meaning of their eventual qualifications are absolutely as solid as they would be under what was the previous normal. We don't quite know yet, do we, what new normal will look like. But so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over the controls to Tracy Considine from New Generation Training and Consultancy. New Generation are an SFJ Awards Centre. They run a wide range of learning courses and qualifications, many within the security and spectator events fields, both of which, of course, have been very seriously impacted by the pandemic. And yet, of course, people need to carry on learning, and they need to carry on becoming qualified, because boy, we're going to need them again as the roadmap starts to let us come back together again and start attending events. So Tracy's very kindly agreed to join us today, and she's going to share their approach to adapting their curriculum planning and delivery, just so that they could carry on giving all their learners the best possible experience and the best possible chance of success in their qualifications. So over to you, and thanks for joining us, Tracy.
Thank you, Candice and SFJ, for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you today to share our journey through the COVID experience and where we are now. So NGTC's position in the first lockdown, we found ourselves in a situation where we had live apprenticeships and AEB funded learners on programme. Only the apprentices had access to online assessment at that point. And live events and nighttime economy stopped, and furlough scheme starts, and that was the situation that we found ourselves in the beginning of March last year. We did act quite rapidly to a situation we was in, and over a period of time, working together with SFJ and with guidance from awarding bodies like yourselves, we quickly realised that we had to, give access to learners' online assessment, which we did. So part of our team here at NGTC developed a secure hybrid delivery model, which was access to all learners. We was also given the opportunity for exam proctoring, and we purchased VLE platform. We increased staff CPD because not everybody had the skills of delivering digitally in the early stages. Some tutors had little digital skills, so the team worked together to upskill those particular people, and so online teaching was improved, and we received CPD in online teaching using the best tools that we had, and obviously moving forward, ongoing improvements, and we received training on CPD for mental health awareness as well. What we found was that some of our learners was deployed into other areas because like live events had stopped, like the sporting events or, crowds for music festivals and things like that. But what we found was that some of our learners had moved into COVID testing sites, so they'd been deployed into those areas. And to match that and to allow us to start doing face-to-face learning as well, staff at NGTC volunteered to support Wigan Council with administering the lateral flow test. So in January 2021, NGTC went through the training to safely manage this process. And this enabled NGTC to complete the physical intervention element of our training and help the students progress into positions as critical workers within employment. Where we are today, so we do live bespoke LMS delivery, new qualifications, apprentices successfully progressing to endpoint assessment, 72% of job progression from my AEB programme, And we maintained the NGTC culture with all staff voluntarily participating in a monthly cuppa call to discuss how they are doing and sharing stories, pictures, practice, videos and personal success while working from home, still enabling us to have that camaraderie with our staff and to ensure that, you know, people are interlinking with each other. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Tracy. And obviously, good to see all the things that you've been able to do and very much keeping both the welfare and the support for your learners and your staff at the centre of all the adaptations you've made, which of course is absolutely fundamental to making sure that we're able to carry on delivering and doing well. So thank you for that. We'll pick up some questions, I'm sure, later on. So what I'd now like to do, just moving us on a little bit further, is introduce you to Jane Hodder, who's kindly agreed to provide the third input session for you today. Jane is one of SFJ Awards' highly experienced external quality assurance team, and her role involves meeting with centres across the country, ensuring that they meet the quality criteria for the qualifications that they offer, and offering them advice on best practice. And through her role, Jane has built up this great overview from her perspective of seeing many of just how centres have been responding and maintaining high quality in this much more virtual world. So Jane, looking forward to hearing from you. So I'll hand you the controls now. Thank you.
Oh, lovely. Nice to be in control. Welcome, everyone. It's really nice to see everybody. I know some of you, but hopefully I'll get to know some more of you as we work together. What I'd like to do today is talk about three of the areas that we've really focused on in my role. In my years as an EV, I've always found that my good centres have had a robust verification process. And this is even more important in the pandemic that we find ourselves in, where support of these assessment processes together with the assessment team and in turn, and indeed the most important part of the process, the learners, it's vital in order for standards to be continually and consistently met and maintained. So the three areas that I want to focus on are the use of technology, creative support for assessors, and contingency planning. So if I move on to the first one, which is really important, the use of technology. Yes, we're all getting used to Zoom, Teams, Skype, whatever forum you have. But in my experience, we've seen some centres adapt really well to this and very, very quickly. Particularly in the security sector, which I know that Mike Needham also is involved in, and I know that was touched upon by Tracy. So as part of the security sector, we do, as EQAs, drop in to some of the remote delivery sessions because they can deliver remotely for some of the units. And recently I dropped into a security company or security training provider who was preparing learners ready for their assessments. And I have to say, I braced myself thinking, oh, will it be death by slideshow? And actually the assessor or trainer was absolutely excellent. She included all the learners, asking individual questions and actually really engaging with the learners. So if they gave a 1 or 2 word answers, she had this brilliant technique using probing questions to really draw out the information. And actually, she wasn't that confident when I asked her afterwards, but she certainly appeared very confident. She also had thought about the delivery and broke up the training with lots of videos and activities to help engage the learners. The centre had also put in contingency for technical issues, and she had a colleague on standby. But actually, during her delivery, one of the learners was causing distortion even when they were talking into the mic, and she unmuted him and said, there's going to be a break shortly and I'll help you log in and out during that break. So it made it very seamless, and she didn't need that technical support. But I guess she's been building up the experience as she did more and more courses. At the end of it, I completed an observation report giving praise and feedback for the centre, and that went to both the awarding body and the SIA, so really important. The verbal feedback I gave her really boosted her confidence. As I say, she wasn't that confident deep down, but she came across really well. And as an EV, I have every confidence that her delivery was meeting standards and learners were getting sufficient knowledge for the sector, which is the most important thing. So it's something I would encourage verifiers at every centre to do, to both give support to learners and assessors, as well as checking on activities. If you can't drop into the Teams or Zooms, can you get added to a conference call and listen to activities such as professional discussions? I often don't see enough observations of assessment practice, and I would really encourage centres to do this. The assessor role can be a really lonely life, and support is really beneficial, especially in the world of COVID, where contact is much more limited. I would also encourage remote activities for verifiers, such as standardisation meetings. Standardisation meetings can involve standardisation activities, and we really encourage this, screen sharing, sharing learner evidence and supporting the assessment team. Verify should really make standardisation interactive and innovative. Planning is really important to achieve this. The other thing I would also encourage verifiers to do is to conduct remote learner interviews to see what's working well and not so well with the assessment team. What is engaging the learners and what's not? The learners themselves often come up with some really good ideas. So in conclusion, for this bit, verification is not just about checking the paperwork trail. It really needs to be proactive and evolve with changing environments. The second area I want to look at is the support for assessors. Support for assessors needs to be creative. A key role for the internal verifier is to support assessors to help them think outside the box. Face-to-face assessment is difficult enough, and remote assessment can obviously be more problematic. I'd really like to give you an example of this. I went to a college recently, and they had been delivering customer service. And the internal verifier had signed off everybody. And when I looked at the work, it really did not meet the standards. And I think the verifier and the assessor both knew this deep down, and I was interviewing them remotely. And they said it had been so hard because the learners had all been working in places like call centres, and they'd been working at home. And they really had not been motivated, and it was like pulling teeth. So I interviewed one of the learners, and she explained the last thing she wanted to do after work was go on her computer and do more work. And the centre had just given her the assessment criteria as knowledge questions to answer. And I have to say, if I'd been the learner, I would have been totally demoted at that point myself, because, you know, it was like watching paint dry. So there was a lot of repetition in the answers, no holistic approach to it, etc. So obviously we had to do a little bit of remedial action. And I suggested a professional discussion might get us from A to B, as the employer in this case was very happy to give the learner time for assessment in activities. And although professional discussions do take time, it would take a lot less time doing a professional discussion than the time chasing someone who really is not engaged with the process. So I think in this case, and in many cases that I see, if a lot more thought and planning had taken place, it's long-term planning, and you can gain an awful lot in a short amount of time if you put that upfront planning in place. So I really think that verifiers need to think about the suitable types of assessment practice that will target the standards effectively, meeting the requirements, which I think is something John touched upon, but also engage the learner and achieve that holistic assessment. One thing I used to do as an assessor myself is talk to a learner about some of the situations they've dealt with in the last week. I encouraged a lot of my learners to keep a diary, so that when I did my visits, they'd have all the information there. They could jot down things that they'd achieved, a difficult customer they've dealt with, that sort of thing. And with a discussion at your visit, then they've got an aid memoir, and they can tell you about a whole loads of range of things that have happened to them, which can tick off an awful lot of assessment criteria. Don't forget also, part of the process, IVs should be encouraging assessors to interview employers. A lot of centres go and ask for an employer to give them a witness testimony. Well, employer often doesn't have time, and they'll give you a one-liner, but if you chat to them about a learner's performance, it will tick an awful lot of assessment criteria. So those are just a few ideas, but I really would encourage verifiers to give a lot of support on planning and creativity, but also be mindful that it has to meet the assessment strategy within the qualification. Always bear that in mind. So that's that area. And the final area that I'd like to talk about, it's quite a short point, but very, very important. And that is for centres to consider their current team. Have you got enough people to support the process, both now and in the future? I often find that centres operate using skeleton staff, and I understand that we've all got financial commitments, but we need to consider putting in some plans for contingency. In these days of COVID in particular, there is important that there's sufficient coverage in case of sickness, but also anytime in case of sickness or turnover of staff. The other thing to think about is keeping records and plans up to date. So if someone has to suddenly take over a role for whatever reason, the information is clearly there for all parties, so learners do not have to repeat work, and the takeover is as seamless as possible, so it has little impact on those learners. So that's, in my conclusion, is really keep abreast of things, be innovative, and think outside the box. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to answering any questions as we move on. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jane, for sharing those insights with us. Some good advice there, and I can see from the chat that your cup of call has had some positive responses. People want to do that, and also I think some recognition that the use of a diary to really support that whole professional discussion process is something that's resonated with a couple of people as well. So we're going to go into questions in a minute, and I would encourage you, if you've got any questions for any of the speakers, or indeed on any topic to do with quality in this virtual world, please do pop them into the question and answer. Just before we do that, I just want to just check out where you all are, and I'm certainly be interested to find out, where are you? What do you expect to see happening in the future? You will all, you're a mix of centres doing different things in different arenas, but actually you've been making your own adaptations. You brought in your own innovations. what's going to happen in the future? Is it going to be reverting back to the way life was? Is it going to be a mixture going forward? Do you think you're going to move fully online into the virtual world? It would just be useful to know. Now we've got a roadmap in place, so we know certain things are going to happen at certain times, and it would probably be naive to think that those timelines will be hit perfectly. But nonetheless, it would be, we can see that there will be a future in which we're out there and meeting up again and carrying on learning and assessment differently. So do let us know what you think. We're very keen to hear what your thoughts are on that, and that will help us to share. And thank you for those that have taken part. As you can see, actually, a massive proportion, 93% of you are expecting to carry on with a mixture, with having both online and face-to-face. And I think that echoes a lot of the information I've certainly been hearing and reading about from organisations like CIPD and others, just in terms of this is made a big change to how everybody works, and that the learning and development sector are not left out of that. So, okay, let's move on now. Let's open up to pick up some of the questions that we've got come through. As we go through, if you've got any others, just do please pop them up into the question and answer as well. And there's one here which is quite an open one, and I'll be asking probably all of our panel members to give us your thoughts on this, because it's obviously got quite a few people saying, yeah, I'm interested in this too. And that's coming in from Mark Henrik. And what Mark has been saying is, I've been reading online that there's a growing momentum away from exams. So what are your thoughts about projects as an alternative to an exam? I don't know who wants to pick that one up. John, do you want to pick that one up to begin with?
Yeah, to start with, and just to start the ball rolling. The overarching principle, if it is the design of the project, does it cover the learning outcomes and assessment criteria in the same way that the exam would? And sometimes exams provide a fast review of the knowledge, and projects tend to provide more depth. So there's a balance, and I've got to be honest. I would say I wouldn't be against it, provided it retained the validity and reliability, but also that comparability of assessment. So that from our perspective, is it valid and reliable, and is it comparable, so as not to disadvantage a cohort of learners who have previously taken the assessment and the qualification versus somebody in the future who would take that qualification. So it's a very fine balancing act from my perspective.
Okay, thanks, John. I mean, I don't know, Tracy, do you have a thought on that? Have you had the experience of having to perhaps, alter in such a way as to deal with this? It'd be good to hear.
Yeah, I think you've got to take it on a case-to-case individuality, depending on what tests or exams can take place. For instance, for one of the components of the qualifications that we deliver, the physical intervention is mandatory. Hence why the staff here got test. We got training for the COVID tests, so we could allow the exams to take place on site, because it would be really difficult to do that remotely.
Okay, thank you for that. Jane, do you have a view from what you've seen? Have you seen anybody using this, perhaps adapting?
Yeah, I do have a view of it, in that we're talking about cohorts of learners, that I think we have to go back to the individual learner, and we have to go back to learning styles, because sometimes an exam can be quite daunting for some learners. I had one business admin learner who really failed the exam time after time after time, and we gave her a project in the end. So I think we've got to consider that, and I know sometimes we've got to take COVID into exams and think about the whole cohort, but I think we really need to also be focusing on the individual, and exams can be quite stressful. And also when you look at proctoring even, we need to think about the exam, the home environment as well, and take that into account. So I think we have to look on it. I think someone else mentioned case by case.
They did, thank you. And I can see we've also had one of our head of assurance has joined us, Paul Kelly. So Paul, I don't know, do you want to comment on this? As an awarding organisation, it'd be good to have your thoughts for folk as well, if you will.
Absolutely. Can you hear me okay?
Thank you. Yes, I can.
Yeah, it's a very nice, juicy question. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I believe what Mark's referring to as well is the question in the media, because public exams were postponed last summer. They will be again this summer. The people are actually having that debate now, and it's not just professionals, not just academics, and teaching unions, but it's MPs as well. Yeah. So I'm always interested in that kind of debate. Always going to find it very, very interesting. But I'm a great believer in the validity of practical project style assessments, because you get that kind of emphasis over time. You can see learners develop, and with our qualifications in the main being vocational, technical, that's what our expertise is. I think they're better suited, obviously, to those kinds of qualifications and sectors. Sure. Knowledge type exams still have the place, but it's vital that they're used in a valid way and they're used correctly as well. And it's the job of AOs, myself, everyone involved in developing qualifications, that the assessment is fit for purpose and it fits the qualification. So sometimes, as Jane was saying, practical observations, practical assessment is exactly the way to go. Sometimes learners who are not great at maybe expressing themselves through the written word, they can then shine and show their ability, because that's what we want to do with the qualification. We want to see if you can hit the assessment criteria. That is the purpose of the assessment. Well, professional discussion could be better for that. But yeah, just the last word on exams. They can be appropriate, but it needs to fit what the qualification purpose is, and that should be clearly aligned to the sector and the learner's needs.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks everybody for that. I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it? You know, it's ultimately, assessment is about confirming, has this individual got the required skills, knowledge, behaviours, whatever it is that actually the focus of that assessment is, and finding the best way to do that is absolutely what we want to have happen. So I would just, advise, really, if somebody's in any doubt, get in touch with Paul or John or any of our colleagues in the awarding organisation. We will give you the best advice we can. And the next question I'd like us to move on to is about some advice. Robert Powell's asked for this. Any advice on what to do when the tech fails? Sometimes a recording might become unavailable, or it's so huge we can't share it. Can we just trust staff to go look for other things? What should we do? Anybody want to pick that one up? Has anybody had it happen on our panel? John, Tracy, Jane? Jane, you talked quite a bit about technology, didn't you? Is there anything from your perspective that you've seen where people have found ways to cope when the tech has let them down?
I mean, at the end of the day, if you are involved in something like a professional discussion, it's very easy to just go on the telephone. It's not a huge difficulty to do that, and we have to be resourceful, and log in, log out, try plan Bs, etc. And it comes back to something I was saying earlier. It's the preparation. Have we tested the system? I had one college actually who, and I meant to mention this in my presentation, so it's come up. One college who had worked with, I think it was someone like O2, and they'd actually provided them with free dongles. So again, this is down to preparation. So if you know the technology is dodgy, some colleges have provided free laptops. But if it's the internet connection, get the dongle, make sure that if it's O2, if it works in your area, and do a little bit of research. So the legwork saves you an awful lot of time in the long run.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And we've got a comment from Richard Siggs, who's just reflecting on this very topic, who said you can combine the telephone call with a video call. So if your sound goes off, you can have the telephone to provide you with the sort of the auditory track really to that conversation, which is so true. Anything further from John? Yeah.
It's about that business continuity. In reality, is it providing within the assessment approach? Is there other ways round that? But as Jane says, testing the system first is quite important, which is one of the reasons why we're going through a piloting with the proctoring, because that's a new piece of technology. We need to make sure that that's safe and reliable.
Sure.
What we don't want is it dropping out when a learner's taking it, or if a learner suddenly switches off the screen sharing. So we need to, it's putting those rules and principles in place. In the real world, something will always go wrong. And it's how we overcome those with a set of guidance that then supports the centre, supports the individual. At the end of the day, we don't want to disadvantage the individual learner.
No,
so it's how we look at that. And
absolutely. I mean, that it's a, this is a big moment for learners. It's a stressful time often for assessment. So I'm sure we've all done it, and touch wood, it hasn't happened so far today, but where your signal just goes, or the dog walks across your background or whatever. And we all experience that, but actually being able to come back from that is so important. So is there anything further? Tracy, did you want to offer a comment on that?
Yeah, regarding tech failing, what we found as well at NGTC was not so much tech failing, but internet access. So, you've got to think of the learners' home lives, and you could have 2 adults and 3 children in that household, all accessing the internet during the day. So we obviously adapted the timings of our classes, and we contact students or learners. We put shifts on. The team are split into shifts so they can access. They have training at different times in the day to be adaptable in that way as well.
No, I think it's really helpful, isn't it? It's really, I mean, Clive Russell's just put a comment up as well. It's another piece of advice people might find, well thinking about. They've got an opt-in WhatsApp group for cohorts, where if people are having tech problems and they lose completely the signal, they can still get in touch, because WhatsApp and other sorts of, I should probably say other social media platforms are available, shouldn't I? But there are other ways for people to get in contact, say things have gone wrong, help, or I can't deal with this. So one other question that I was interested in, which is really, I think, what you've found, Tracy, in terms of, obviously you're being able to have staff learn how to do the lateral flow tests. That's a comfort to the staff. It keeps the learners able to come in. But I'm just curious as to what kind of challenges your learners brought with them. Were they nervous when they were coming in, and how did they react really to the changed circumstances?
Yeah, I think it was, because if you're going to do some teaching in a different environment, some learning in a different environment, you're getting asked, from a learner's point of view, you're getting asked to come into a centre in the lockdown. And it's those assurances. And we always send briefs out before. We work with the employers as well. And we send of what is going to happen today and what's expected to do. A lot of our learners are actually working on COVID sites as well, so they are tested and they are used to the tests in the environment. But because there is a 30-minute wait when we've conducted the test, it's just to calm the nerves, to be honest with you. And like I said, most of the learners have already had tests like that. But learners are really keen to get the qualification, so they really want to, and when they come into a safe environment, they feel reassured. We're prepared if the results are, if we get a positive result, that counselling type of thing, and the next stages are put in place, so everything is clear from the start.
Yeah, it's really important, isn't it, to keep the learners feeling that they're actually being supported in the whole journey and process that they're going through. I've got a couple of other quick questions that have popped up. One is, does SFJ Awards have any recommendations to offer around what would be a sufficient length of time for a professional discussion? I don't know whether John or Paul, either of you, would like to pick up on that one.
I could start,
Paul?
and then John can come in. Well, for me, it's almost the other way about. Is how can the assessment criteria or learning outcome be hit using that professional discussion? So rather than focusing on the length of time, it's thinking about how many questions will be positioned to the learner, how long we'll need to make that response. And it's more of a question is, I know it's an how long is a piece of string type question, but what does a learner need to hit that criteria, and if you're going to equate it to possibly another type of test, how many words would that learner need to write if it was written exercise, or how long would it take them to demonstrate it if it was a practical one? So my short answer is obviously there is no obviously stock time for these things. Is focus on the assessment criteria and learning outcome. If the learner can hit that in the sufficient time, Ofqual in terms of these type of assessments will always talk about average learners. So again, you've got to bear that in mind. Some learners can obviously respond quicker than others. So bear in mind an average learner. Think how that would work in another type of assessment as well. But focus on the learning outcome and assessment criteria. So if there's 5 learning criteria across 5 assessments, then obviously a couple of minutes is not going to do the trick.
Sure.
You've got to work across and make sure, as John said, learners got every opportunity and they will not be disadvantaged to kind of show and demonstrate what their knowledge is.
Okay, thanks for that. Does anybody else want to offer any thoughts on that? How do people normally, you mentioned the average learner, not quite sure what an average learner looks like, but we're all individuals, aren't we, and with different styles. But is there anything else? John, you look like you're...
Yeah, it is, as Paul mentioned, it is how long's a piece of string in terms of a professional discussion, and that probing further as you get one response, does that elicit the next response? And having it is a difficult scenario, because you've got to then structure it in the right way to cover the learning outcomes and assessment criteria. Sure. So that somebody would be maybe doing it in 5 minutes, somebody else might take 20. Is how concise and knowledgeable they are.
Okay, thank you. I've got one last one here, really, Jane, and I think maybe it's for you to answer, but I guess either Paul or others may also have a comment, and that's around how have people been carrying on with the standardization meetings internally? How has that been able to be continued effectively?
Yeah, I think centres have been meeting with assessors, but I don't think I would necessarily call them standardization meetings as such. And I think initially that was right and proper to meet with assessors and give that support. But I think now, we're a long time into the pandemic and we have to start getting back into that standardization and making sure that people are targeting both the assessment criteria and the guidance effectively, but also, as I mentioned in my presentation, supporting the assessors for using different forums and seeing how they're working with it, technology. So I think it's time to move forward with the standardization.
Okay, thank you very much on that. And we're very, very close to being out of time now. So what I want to do is very quickly now is just to move on. Quick final question. We're going to run these webinars over the course of the year. We're going to carry on with that. Would you be interested in us having a conference as well? Just pop in and answer quickly to that, if you will. And if you want to use the chat or send us an email subsequently, if we're going to do that, what kind of things should we be aiming to cover for you? So do let us know your views on that. And as you're doing that, what I'm going to do is just thank everybody really for joining today. I want to thank our speakers, John Clark, Tracy Considine, Jane Hodder, and also last minute entrant Paul Kelly for taking part today, and finally, of course, to Zoe for making sure the technology worked in our favour. Thank you for taking part, and just for your interest, 2 more webinars coming up that you might find of interest. One, not by us, but by our sister organisation, Skills for Justice, who run a members programme with members-only events, but they are giving some free taster slots to people taking part in our webinar today. So if anybody wants to have a go at that, you just let us know. There should be contact details on the screen, so you can let us know. We will be sending you an email after the event. The email will have all of the contact details. I know we've been answering questions about, can we see the slides, can we get access to? We'll be doing all of that after the event for you, and we will be sending you details for these events as well. And just in the very last closing seconds, your feedback on each event helps us to make sure the next one is good and informative. So please, can you fill in the quick survey that will pop up as you leave the webinar? And finally, if you want to take part, get in touch, let us know. We'd love to hear from you as well. Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you to everybody who took part in today's event. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for now. Bye-bye.